When we watch sports, we compare against top performers and against previous years to see if we made some progress and maybe to find new means to train and new goals to set. We must remain cognizant that not everyone has had the same means and opportunities to get there or the same tools. There are limitations to the performance one can expect to achieve. In the first related videos, we established that exercise is essential to our survival in a healthy and productive manner to contribute to society and our growth. We raised the questions: to which extent should we do sports, and does having elite sports, a top-level athletics, helps our society further? We started by establishing that the social context doesn't give equal starting points and continuing chances to all. The ability to train, the access to facilities, and the timing to performance are critical features to succeed and access elite levels. But in most sports, they are quite unequal. We saw how technologies in very unexpected areas become drivers of the wins and of the progress in performances, giving advantages to the well-sponsored. We have approached that through four aspects: the facilities, the equipment, the training methods, and nutrition. We saw that performance improvements, especially for the elite, the top performers, are partially due to technological advances and changes and its applications, and even more so for the elite levels. We saw that genetics show that we are not born equal as far as performances are concerned, and possibly your greatest champions might not need your adulation, but only your curiosity. Today, we will attack the most controversial and most misunderstood and very efficacious use of products to enhance performances. It will not just be doping. It includes accepted products, the blinded vision of the populations, and the ridiculous attempt to control it, or rather to pretend to control it. Your basis might be shattered. The push to performance to win at any cost has driven many athletes to find booster products of any type. Doping is on everyone's mind as we close eyes on reality. There is no interest at any level to catch someone not respecting the rules, as it only brings a negative image to the culprit sport. Sport is driven by federations, which thrive for recognitions to make sport more attractive, more spectacular, and with more records. To address and understand this very controversial topic, we will break it into four portions. The first is using accepted products to maintain a clean image while providing better performances with a few allowed alternative solutions. There are products that have been deemed illegal. Don't be fooled. To reach that status of forbidden products, it must be very obvious and takes a long time. For the third portion, we must discuss TUEs, therapeutic usage exemptions. This permits athletes to take any of the illegal substances, relieving the federations from testing, avoiding legal battles. The fourth is obviously the testing. It must appear well organized and thorough. For that, federations have set up outside organisms such as WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, which controls the delinquent athletes, relieving federations from further implications. The most practical solution for all federations is simply to allow drugs. Meldonium, for example, increases the vascularization of the heart muscle, reduces the cardiac rhythm, bringing more oxygen to the heart muscle. In such, it increases the endurance and helps the recovery from effort. The product exists since 1970, but only came on a prohibited list in 2016. There are many more meldoniums which are probably performance enhancing in the world, but who has a vested interest to bring this forward? It only brings a negative image and a new drug to test against. Creatine is a very widely used drug in the world and does not require any prescriptions in many countries and therefore is widely available on the web. Creatine is a small peptide made of 3 amino acids, glycines, arginine, and methionine. Creatine can quickly help the creation of muscle mass, reduce fat content of the muscles, and could increase the strength by 0.5 to 10%, according to some studies. It is helpful for short repetitive efforts such as sprints or weight training, but some effects have been shown on endurance sports as well. Since no one dares make a reliable study on the product, it is allowed by all federations. It is estimated that 50% of US college athletes use creatine. The sales in 2000 were 300 million and are estimated to be over 1 billion today in a 3 billion nutritional business. It is difficult to imagine that it is not effective, and who would finance a clinical study to prove or disprove its effect? The sports nutrition market is 8.6 billion kilos in 2013 and expected to be 14.7 in 2020, according to Statista, much higher than the volume dispensed for malnutrition in developing countries. Caffeine is a commonly used substance. It is used as a short-term stimulant and it increases blood pressure, increases pulse rate, stomach acids, breaks down fat stores, and releases fat contents into the bloodstream. This last effect seems to delay the depletion of glycogen into the muscle by 50%, allowing the athlete to work longer before exhaustion. The authority allows 12 milligrams per liter of urine, corresponding to these 8 cups of coffee. However, the level will be lower by the time the athlete is tested after the competitions. 50% is gone after 3 to 5 hours. Question: if it helps, why is it not doping? Beta-2 adrenergic agonists act like steroids on the body. There are many steroids properties: bronchodilators, relaxes muscles and lungs, reduces body fat, raises temperatures, increases metabolism. One example is clenbuterol. It is used as an asthma drug for horses as well. Clenbuterol is on the list of banned substances. Another example is albuterol or salbutamol. It is one of the most confusing, whereas most widespread use of performance-enhancing substance, the anti-asthma drug. Salbutamol, the anti-asthma drugs widely sold under Ventolin or other brand names. It was discovered in 1966 and in 1972 became forbidden when doping controls were first initiated. The 16-year-old Rick Demond lost his gold medal in a 400-meter freestyle in the Munich Olympics in 1972 after a positive test for ephedrine in his asthma medication Marax. In 1986, the International Olympic Committee permitted the use of inhaled salbutamol, although other beta-2 agonists were not. However, in 1990, given the very steep rise of users, it allowed the use of beta-2 agonists provided proof of asthma was given. Every puff of Ventolin increases the oxygen consumption by 0.3 liters, which is very critical for anabolic sports. For swimming, that is the most critical restriction of performance. Rick Demond, but also Mark Spitz, the 7 Olympic gold medalists, were asthma sufferers. This can be also classified as new technology. With this, swimmers can do today the more efficient 50 meters newly allowed underwater glide for each length. Non-asthmatic swimmers would have no chance. Phelps and others do the 400 IM individual medley, the most oxygen-intensive event in swimming, with underwater glides of 50 meters for each of the 8 lengths. Non-asthmatics declared would beg for air before each turn. This salbutamol is used widely instead of the forbidden clenbuterol as an anabolic steroid. WADA allows exemptions for 1,600 micrograms over 24 hours, divided in doses of not over 800 micrograms for 12 hours, which corresponds to 8 puffs of Ventolin. According to the medical precautionary usage of this product, the first 4 inhalations are a maximum per day. The other 4 additional should be done under hospital supervision. The WADA allowed 8 inhalations per day, corresponding to 1,000 nanograms per milliliters threshold in urine samples. In 2007, the cyclist Petacci was caught with 1,352 nanograms per milliliters, way above his prescriptions. In 2014, Ulysses was caught with 1,920 nanograms per milliliters and was suspended by his Swiss federations as he could not provide any explanation. Froome, the multiple Tour de France winner, was tested with 2,000 nanograms per milliliters, but was relaxed as his team provided acceptable usage. The drug has a half-life in the body of 5 to 6 hours, and all traces have disappeared within 24 hours. If you consider that 8 puffs per day should be done under hospital supervision, giving a threshold of 1,000 nanograms per milliliters of urine, and that the degradation is 50% every 6 hours, and that 2000 nanograms per milliliters is now acceptable, this is becoming truly ridiculous. Salbutamol is available as tablet, liquid, and suppository, which in theory are not allowed for athletes, but no one can detect a pharmaceutical form. Instead of fighting it, the sport authorities have relaxed requirements for TUEs for these products, and today a simple declaration of usage by the doctor is required. Asthma is a potential restriction for performance for about 8% of the population affected. If an attack happens during competition, it can be minimized with proper preparations. Non-declared asthmatics has virtually no chance to reach the top in most sports. Is it used as an enhancement to increase oxygen consumptions and performance? Is it an avenue to take B2 agonists? 76% of swimmers are declared asthmatics and 8% of cross-country skiers. Supporters mention that athletes breathe much more air than normal persons and therefore have a greater risk of developing allergic reactions. Cold air for winter athletes is pointed out and chlorine for swimmers. With 8% of the children developing asthma in 2016, the percentage of 80% for all endurance sports athletes is mind-boggling. Medical professions suggest that a good warm-up can avoid getting asthmatic attacks during competitions. With the support of the pharmaceutical industry, the medical profession declared exercise-induced asthma as a pathology in the 1990s. This allowed the market for salbutamol to explode, and from an 8% maximum market to much higher levels with much higher posology. Originally, asthma was recognized as an ailment already in 4000 BE. It is supposed to be close to 8%, mostly in developed countries. In the 1960s, EIB, exercise-induced bronchoconstrictions, was named as a pathology. Many drugs were developed for this rapid-growing market. In the 1972 Olympics, it was supposed to be controlled. Ventolin was on the market in 1980. By 2004, WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, took it off the list as it was so widely used by athletes. Today, most, if not all, athletes are declared asthmatics. Given such widespread usage, such high dose allowed, it is difficult to believe that these drugs would lead to clean sports performances. Maybe there should be competitions separating declared asthmatics from the others. Actually, the aerosol market is expected to reach $191 billion by 2032. It can come in different pharmaceutical forms. The albuterol market will reach $8 billion by 1930. There are many more products or drugs that are legal or accepted. These were just a few examples. However, some have been deemed illegal. 100 to 150 molecules are forbidden all the time. Some are forbidden only during competitions. That list is published every year by WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency. That is not very much if you consider that 30 to 50 new molecules are approved every year. Many more are created but not approved. We mentioned meldonium before, which appeared on the list 48 years after its first approval. Since then, in 2018, levothyrox has been on many athletes' lists. This thyroid drug helps performance in 3 ways: stimulation of the organism, loss of fat, and potential action anabolic. It is great for endurance sports, obviously, cycling, running, and so on. This product is not forbidden and probably will never be. Sales are expected to reach $4 billion by 2032. Although 23 million Americans are prescribed with this drug, it is thought to be widely overprescribed, as usual. We first started to design new molecules in 1930, and by 2013 there were 1,400 new ones, classified as NME, NCE, NBEs entities. With all the pharmaceutical forms, usage, and commercial versions, that makes over 35,000 approved products. In addition, only a few make it to the approved status. In fact, typically there are roughly 7,000 products in development, but only 50 to 60 are approved every year. The other molecules are often registered and kept into the big pharma drawers. That is a lot of potential products. Development goes from different phases, from discovery to marketing. The cost of that full process can reach up to $2.5 billion. The one who reached the markets did so as they have a potential sales of at least $1 billion per year. We have seen that many very helpful products are not only accepted but very highly used, specifically by elite athletes in proportion and dosages that defies ethics. There are many products on a forbidden list. However, that list is dwarfed by the number of products already existing and mostly being developed every day, more potent and efficacious for performances than the previous ones. In any way, it takes decades for products to reach that forbidden list. On top of this, federations, the IOCs, and the athletes have created TUEs, therapeutic use exemptions. Through various push by world federations, athletes, sports promoters, and the medical field, the TU process was created, pushed by legal pressures of the athletes to allow more athletes to take some of these drugs as required to treat an illness or condition. The WADA prohibited list is overturned. TUEs are used extensively, bypassing the doping list prohibition. TUEs permit to take virtually all banned substances. When the Fancy Bears, a Russian hacking group, threatened to release medical records of some athletes, which included TUEs, the world of sports went crazy. But only a few names were revealed and the matter was watched down. Was it due to the limited access to medical records? Due to some national deal of blackmailing? It was following the Russian discovery of the sponsored doping allegations. Due to private deal with some athletes? Nevertheless, TUEs are well-kept secrets for all athletes and nations. Australia estimates that there are 200 TUEs in 2012 already for 58 sports. There was TUEs for Ritalin, a molecule used for ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorders, but used as a stimulant for athletes. Every year, swimming, cycling, athletics have the highest number of TUEs. The WADA list is shattered, replaced by TUEs. These well-kept secrets do not include just asthma drugs, which doesn't even require TUEs, as mentioned earlier. The usage of TUEs besides ADHD include hydrocortisone, insulin, oxycodone, human growth hormone, and testosterone. The human growth hormone is a good example. Synthetic human growth hormone was developed in 1985 and approved by the FDA for specific usage for children and adults. In children, these injections are approved for treating rare genetic disorders, chronic kidney diseases, and short stature for children. For adults, it is intended for short bowel syndrome, some rare tumors, and muscle wasting resulting from HIV. However, the worldwide need for these drugs and for this intended usage is less than 1% of what the current sales would predict. The main usage is for enhancement of performance. Human growth hormone simply helps build muscle, useful for short burst events, but also helps tired muscle to recuperate faster, allowing athletes to train harder and more often. Apparently, it is also used as a cocktail with other drugs such as steroids. Why would top-ranking athletes of any sport suffer such rare diseases and need these specific drugs to, in theory, even the field? That is very questionable. There are many examples of drugs present in TUEs of athletes. Former cancer sufferers who were mediocre athletes have become top-ranking once affected, possibly thanks to TUEs. Testosterone, human growth hormones, EPO have been pointed out as involved in the development of prostate, testicular, or ovarian cancers. Athletes do not know if their competitors have TUEs for these or other drugs. The usage of TUEs is quite widespread. At least the TUEs of athletes should be opened, or at the very least, athletes having TUEs should be mentioned. Performance-enhancing substances have been used since sports exist. The products were similar to the one used by various societies to increase the fierceness of warriors in battles. Of course, at that time, it was accepted, uncontrolled and uncontrollable, whereas it was probably minutely efficient if you compare to modern means. With the potency of products or devices we can take, testing was instituted. So everything is fine and fair, right? In 1967, the IOC established the first commission on doping, with the first drug testing in 1968 in the Olympics in Grenoble and Mexico, mostly testing for narcotics, analgesics, and stimulants, as tests for anabolic steroids were not available. During the 1972 Olympics, 2,000 samples were taken, disqualifying 7 athletes, but only on stimulants. In Montreal, Only 800 tests were taken, and tests including steroids resulting in the disqualification of 1.4% of the athletes. In 1983, during the Pan Am Games, surprise testing with a new test for steroids resulted in many athletes withdrawing from the Games. Since roughly 1980, the drug controls are being organized by an international institution called WADA, World Anti-Doping Agency. In 1999, following the first World Conference on Doping in Lausanne in February 1999, WADA is set up as a foundation. Since then, many athletes have been either caught or have admitted to taking drugs as doping. Doping is a very prevalent activity for athletes. Over 30% of the athletes participating in the 2011 World Championships admitting having used banned substances during their careers. If you think that, of course, some would not admit, that some don't know or don't want to see that the pills or the coach or doctors are giving are not just vitamins, some might be afraid, the number can only be underinflated. WADA estimates that 44% of them had used drugs, while only 0.5% of those tested were caught. That says it all. Testing has a cost. Taking samples, urine or blood, and the lab tests are expensive. It would be high if done properly. The Australian Anti-Doping Authority estimates that regular testing of athletes should cost around $40,000 per athlete per year. WADA is a non-profit organization set up originally by the IOC. Its foundation board and executive boards are composed mainly of sports and related public authorities. The total funding is roughly $30 million per year. That is 0.4 commitment to doping control. An RT investigation reveals some alarming numbers relative to doping costs. It is much below 1% of the estimated world doping revenues of $30 billion and ridiculously small compared to the estimated world revenues from sport of $700 billion. According to RT again, the cost of doping regimen of a basic athlete is $6,000 per year, including ozone, creatine, Ventolin, amino acids. $30,000 for an international athlete to get EPO, testosterone, human growth hormones, and $100,000 for top athletes with more sophisticated products. The salary of guru doping doctors is over $6 million. Russia, China, and India produce, as expected, 40% of the doping substances, with 70 tons of testosterone and 700 tons of steroids are produced every year. The estimation is that 8 million athletes dope regularly to use these substances, despite the fact that less than 2% tests are positive. Of the 10 men who ran below 980 in 100 meters, 9 were controlled positive. The USADA, the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, had revenues from grants of $21.6 million in 2017 and expenses of $11.3 million for testing. With that budget, it completed 6,480 tests. Only 400 to 500 tests for the year were for swimming, which has 2,800 swim clubs. 2,000 tests were performed from track and fields with these 130,000 registered athletes, basically 1.5% chance to be tested once in a lifetime when an athlete should be tested multiple times per year. That is much more than basketball with 12 tests, American football with 9, and even baseball, 0. WADA, as the entity responsible, monitors all the testing around the globe, their own and mostly that of the other national sports federations, 70% of the total. The growth of sports is tremendous, but the number of samples analyzed was already tiny but doesn't grow very much. The IOC is only one of the profiteers of the sport. The revenues of the hundreds earner athletes is more than the spend for the drug testing for the nation. Countries do not test the same. WADA just monitors. China, with 1.5 billion people, is first, the number of one country in medal counts in the last Olympics. The USA only comes seventh, with a third of the Chinese populations, but much behind Germany, 8 times more testing, France, Italy, and Russia, UK, and Japan. But there are many countries still much ahead, such as Sweden, with 320 tests per million. Furthermore, the biggest culprits are not the one we think. As percentage, it is not China, always pointed at the fingers. In fact, the countries testing the least proportionally are the one failing the most tests. Testing is a main tool to catch culprits, one would think. However, there are many reasons why this is not efficient. First, we need to know the molecules to test them. There are roughly 200 molecules on a banned list. Unfortunately, there are many more substances in the world. Roughly 2,000 molecules are officially approved. Further, new molecules are discovered or rather being developed and not approved or not yet approved. There are also many unknown molecules which some peoples are manipulating beyond the official processes, and new ones are being created every day. Although some generic ones can be tested generically, some designer drugs can bypass the test thresholds. Some drugs take a long time to come on the list. Meldonium, mentioned earlier, is a good example. The antihistaminic drug, developed in 1970, allowing athletes to recover quicker, was primarily used drug in the Eastern Bloc. Some doping cannot be tested against. Blood doping consists of transfusing one's own blood with increased level of red cells to improve aerobic capacity and endurance. There are different types of blood doping using synthetic oxygen carriers beside our own blood cells, increasing EPO levels and simply transferring blood cells on others. A test for EPO was made valid in 2003 with synthetic oxygen carriers in 2004. A test for autologous blood transfusion is not yet available. There's the issue that a test must be developed to test against a drug. The cost of developing a test reliable and acceptable to legal authorities, always more challenging, is roughly $100,000 to $200,000. There should be around 200 banned substances to test against. If the tests do work, it is often limited in its efficiency. No organisms involved, IOC, National Olympic Committees, sports federations, have a vested interest in funding research for testing of banned substances given the cost and the uncertainty and validity of the results, and mostly the liability which would ensue. All of them are better off paying lip service to doping and avoid catching athletes, which is always a bad image for the sport. Once developed, tests must be accurate but also proven to be flawless, or the athletes' armies of lawyers are ready to jump from behind the doors. Clenbuterol is a beta-2 agonist, as the allowed Ventolin. This widely used substance, available before the 1980s, only became detectable 12 years later in 1992 and led to many positive controls of many famous athletes. To catch a cheater, multiple tests must be performed regularly, not just once, if ever. Most national Olympic committees devote very little funds for testing anyway. Even the biggest countries spend extremely little in comparison to the revenue of sports. To be efficient, athletes should be tested very frequently, especially given the life cycle of the drug in the body. As we've seen before, there is not even enough funds to test each athlete once in their career. With $1 million involved, it is expected that someone might try to circumvent the procedures to ensure negative results. First, the sample testing is not as safe as expected. Second, the testers are people too. Testing a multimillionaire athlete and his lawyers is challenging. Third, we assume that the test labs are also secure, but they are not banks, and there's millions at the end. But we can be sure that Azerbaijan, Turkey, or even China would spend without restraints to ensure that the perfect safety of samples during the whole process, given that catching a local athlete would result in a negative image. One easy way to avoid tests is not being present. Many an athlete miss being present for a surprised test. The penalty is minimal and the danger and damage for the athlete's reputation is minimized. To the public, that is very acceptable, as athletes quickly come to the press to point out the many restrictions and being forced to submit whereabouts. If one takes into consideration the small windows of traceability of many drugs and the relatively rarity of the surprise test, missing one surprise test for a slap of the finger can be a quick passage. That is, when the surprise are indeed won. A very common way to avoid a surprise is also to travel to faraway places to minimize the chances of being tested. Have you ever wondered why your best team goes on oxygenation trips or training camps? Of course, anti-doping agencies can travel too, and the athlete and coaches are supposed to give their whereabouts, but seeing the puny budget of the old doping agencies in the world, traveling to Kenya, South Africa, Oceania seems to be strange at best. On top of these many issues, all drugs are absorbed by the body. Typically 6 hours are necessary or 24 hours to see no more trace. Very few, only the amateurs, new professionals, get caught during a meet. Most athletes know when to stop taking a performance-enhancing drugs early enough to avoid detection. Doctors and pharmacists develop drugs to be more quickly absorbed by the body and therefore less detectable. Testers are forbidden to come also between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., enough of a window for the drug to disappear. On top of this, athletes are allowed 2 misses per year. Plus, athletes and doctors now use microdosing to time perfectly the potential detection. Now for my little bit of personal experience, let me share a couple of examples that might illustrate our purpose here. If you recall from the previous videos, I mentioned that I have been an international swimmer specialized in the 400 IM, the individual medley. That is a distance, mid-distance, consisting of 100-meter butterfly, backstrokes, breaststrokes, and freestyle. In my view and that of many swimmers, it is one of the hardest races. On top of being a mid-distance, it implies 4 time changes of pace and of muscle groups. This implies a very high oxygen consumption and a difficulty to be able to pace and manage your efforts as you would do in a 400 freestyle, for example. One tries to approach each stroke separately and try to minimize the physical stress as you transition between each strokes. In my case, I try to make butterfly as smooth as possible to minimize oxygen consumptions. In backstrokes, oxygenation is easier as your head is out of the water, but the kicking, if you want to be a good pace, is hard and requires quite a bit of oxygen as well. Next, the backstroke, to be smooth, needs some gliding, and it takes a long time between breaths. For me, that was a time after the third or fourth stroke in breaststrokes when the lungs start to burn, the breath is weeping, and the lactic acid is filling up in the muscles. The race becomes very painful from that point, if you want to do well, of course. I should probably have been diagnosed with exercise-induced bronchoconstrictions, EIB, that we mentioned earlier. But again, everyone has this if you maximize your effort. At some point, your oxygen will not reach your muscles. That is sport, isn't it? With Ventolin, I could probably postpone the pain entirely and shave off quite a few seconds of my time. Over time, I met many other persons ranked before me, and all were asthma sufferers. Although I didn't know that then, many swimmers told me that when they were diagnosed with EIB, their performance improved radically, obviously. Although I and we can never prove anything, I've witnessed many times when swimmers during workouts are way behind and suddenly shine on the top competition. That was especially in NC2As, the mental, they say. In my time, the time where the Eastern Bloc nations shined, the women of course, but the men as well, I used to drink 1 espresso before the finals, and sometimes in the morning 1 of those dissolving vitamin C tablets. I had the impression that I was cheating. How naive can one be? Well, that is so puny and ridiculous to compare to what people did take then. Today, besides all the allowed substances and the refinements of today's protocol with microdose cocktails to maximize efficiency and annihilate the risk of getting caught, despite the athlete's biological passports and a falsely surprising test, things are probably getting much worse. This is my personal experience. It might not convince you, but hopefully will make you think. Every athlete of all sports wants to thrive, to improve, and eventually to excel and win. It always starts with a hard workout. To continue progression, one works harder. To optimize further, optimization of the techniques with the best coaches and good teams and tools. When that stagnates, as the body can only perform so much, nutritional help is thought and maybe an improved diet. When that is not enough, all allowed products can be tried because they are easily accessible, permitted, and often used by all the other competitors, such as caffeine, creatine, Ventolin. To reach or to stay at the elite levels, the step is already taken to try the first forbidden substances. This is just a question of dosages. If that fails, and if it is not enough, the TUE process gives a free pass towards more potent substances. After, with a proper professional help and good management, the ludicrous testing are easily bypassed. These are the necessary steps to reach the elite level. With the pressure for performance, The IOC, the nations, the federations spend on communications but pay only lip service to control of performances. They simply allow many performance-enhancing drugs, Ventolin, creatine, closing eyes on ridiculously expanding usage. They created TUEs for extremely hard drugs, closing the curtains on transparency and avoiding potential legal issues and negative discussions. They allow totally unreasonable thresholds thanks to the medical field and the protection of the inappropriate laws. They put tiny amount for testing just for public relation purposes, which really should be a slap in the face of the public. The sheer volume of drug sales, many folds higher than expecting a real therapeutic usage of real patients, should be the eye-opener. The revenues from sports, pharmaceutical drugs, and other profiteers so much outweigh the drive for some transparency that drug testing potential is generations behind the drug development and drug usage. Yes, we cannot do anything against these facts. The worst we can do for sport is believing that Federation and the IOC play a fair game. We must just consider this as a spectacle, not as sport. Sports is supposed to be a way to excel, to build a mind, and to try to find one's limits. Over the years, as in other areas, we have created events to improve human performance. With the support of the media and the sponsors, we focus on the performance and the stars that accomplish them. To achieve higher levels of performance, more specialized athletes are needed. To win and to reach new peaks, athletes do not just train harder and better. Above all, it is necessary to have the adequate physiology and now adopt the professional enhancing performance products. To reach the elite, it is necessary to adopt certain products. Forget determination, hard work, fairness, courage, discipline, specific nutrition, allowed products such as Ventolin, creatine, even EPO, until you get your specific dosage steroids. EPO, plans to avoid and bypass issues of testing, microdosing of new products, and so on. Then you will succeed, even without trying as hard as those who might not use as much. Of course, you do not believe all this. You want to think that only a few must do it, but overall it is well controlled, right? Past dopers were caught and all is well. Their inhuman performances were caught. The many measurements and prevalence of users are nice studies, but they are irrelevant. Steroid markets of 3.4 billion is never used for sports, of course. The 6% growth has nothing to do with the growth of performances. Progression in all sports is still constant. For cycling, specialists point to the wattage developed during always more grueling ascensions were not normal but are beaten every year. Normal riders reach 250 to a max of 300 watts for short periods. The progressions of the average speeds keeps improving despite the yearly warning that the next year cannot be faster because the sport is clean now. Pogacar, the latest multiple winner, reached 415 watts for sustained periods. It is not Laurent Fignon caught on amphetamine, or Lawrence Armstrong, of course, or Froome, the heavily asthmatic cyclist, when each time reporters swear that these levels will not be reached, that the cycling is clean. In Paris 2024, Pan Zandler won the 100-meter freestyle with 46.4, beating his own world record by 4/10. He finished 1 second faster than the seconds, that is 2.1% faster than the field. Immediately, critics screamed doping as they are Chinese, despite the fact that they are the most tested nation at the Olympics, with flawless results. On the other hand, Kati Ledecky won the 59 meters with 15 minutes 30 seconds, beating the fields by 10 seconds, but that is only 1% faster. However, Léon Marchand won the 400 IM with 4 minutes 2 seconds, 6 seconds ahead of the rest, that is 2.5% faster, more than Pan Zandler. Of course, being French and training in the US is above all reproach. The same person won on the same day 200 breaststroke and 200 butterfly in record times. Two very demanding events demonstrating an extremely rapid recovery. It is almost incredible to swim two events on the same day. That happens for sprinters on short distance who might be in a relay on the same day. One would argue that competitors were much weaker than Marchand. All of them. World records keep being broken in all sports and in all events. Humans have not evolved suddenly. Techniques improved, of course. But most of the top performers of the 100-meter dash have been caught doping at some point. But technology, pharmacology, in this case, is improving against really no attempts to seriously address the issue. which is probably not solvable. There are movements now to create games in 2025 where everything is allowed. Of course, in my opinion, that would be stupid and dangerous, but why not if persons want to endanger their lives for entertainment? There have been many abuses and deaths allegedly or indirectly due to doping, such as Simpson or Pantani, and apparently 10 others according to the New York Times. And don't tell that to the East German athletes who are suing their former government for forcing and hiding doping following numerous cancers, death, and heart condition. Because, in any way, even the current events are not sport, but are already entertainment. It has nothing to do with courage or hard work. We did watch gladiators for entertainment in the past. We have evolved, technically, but certainly not ethically. We have evolved in subtlety. We are now better at pretending that it is good for humanity. Roman dictators, senate, and powers have been replaced by our new gods, which we trust blindly, guided by the new dictatorships, the federations, the IOC, the media industry, supported by the legal industry and the medical professions, which are not famous for their ethics, but more for their own selfishness or generally stupidity, which typically are related qualities. We saw that social differences impact the chances to reach the elite level. We review that technologies are necessary to train properly and to attain adequate performances, unleveling the field. We saw that genetics has become the main drivers to reach the elite levels. Without a proper physiology, the common man or woman has no chance to compete at a high level, no matter how high or hard one tries or trains. Today, these fourth parts analyze what I called spurious improvements. Hopefully you saw that athletes can move very easily up the ladder of consumptions of performance-enhancing products. Some are just readily available. The main ones are just legal or accepted. Many others approved drugs are on a 200 or so forbidden list. Many others approved drugs are not on that list and will never be. Many are being developed daily, more potent, more efficacious, less detectable. Doctors help athletes in finding best cocktails and microdosing to escape potential tests. If not enough, you still have doctors to make you TUEs, which basically is a freedom to use anything you want. Legal forces are there to protect the athletes from potential suspensions. Testing is just a foggy means to pretend doing something and gives the more gullible the impression that the elite sport is clean. Ridiculous funding, sampling issues, testing issues will never suffice, especially as there is absolutely no will to catch anyone, as it would give the wrong image. With so much money at stake, and frankly the public, us, applauding, wishing for higher, better, faster performance, who is to stop this? Athletes make huge amount of money and are compelled to take things if they want a chance to compete. Sad but true. Elite sports doesn't bring any value to societies. It enriches many, as usual, but is detrimental to the need to exercise of nations. Yes, sport is good. Elite sport is certainly not.